Hello ladies and gentlemen of the internet, it is time for another quick guide video. Last time we covered a few crucial points you want to consider when starting out in Crowfall. Today I'll be covering the passive training a bit more in depth. Let's talk about what training tracks are best suited for your playstyle, the limitations you have inside of the system, and a few tips or tricks to make your training progress as efficient as possible. I'm Shadiz, I stream about 3 days a week on Twitch, link is in the description below, and I upload new videos on YouTube on a weekly basis. Without further ado though, let's get into this. Here's my quick summary and overview of the passive skill system. Before we start, I do want to clear up a few things I mentioned in my previous video. I said that a lot of the choices you'll be making are permanent, and although this is true, I want to emphasize that making a wrong choice or wanting to go a different route after a few days of playing won't be as detrimental as it sounds. For example, if you put points into the wrong skills, yes, that training time you spent won't be reversible, but in the long run it won't make your build completely invaluable, as the early points you spent will be quite irrelevant compared to the amount you'd have accumulated over the few months. So if you feel you want to switch training tracks, go ahead and do so. You'll be just fine. Okay, so let's recap what the passive skill system is real quick before getting into more specifics. This system is basically an account-wide skill tree that allows you to accumulate training points over time while being both online and offline. Look at it as fine-tuning your account towards your preferred playstyle. There are 3 major skill trees that you can choose from. These are combat, crafting, and exploration. You can only train 2 of these at any given time, but you are free to switch your active tracks at any given time as well. Spending points or time into these tracks is a permanent choice, so spending points into something you ultimately don't want will be kind of time lost. Now, as I mentioned before, making a wrong choice early on won't set you back as much as it sounds, but it is definitely valuable to have a good general idea of where you want to go. Once you have progressed far enough into one of these basic training tracks, things start to open up and you'll be able to start investing into some more specific sub-tracks. For example, in the crafting track, you'll have to work yourself towards one of the 8 different profession nodes before you can advance towards its specialization sub-track and start investing time in there. Now let's get into some more specifics and talk about what combination of skill tracks would suit your preferred playstyle the most. In general, there are 3 main playstyles you can go for. Obviously, there is more nuance to this, but for the purpose of this video, we're keeping it simple. We have combatants, crafters, and harvesters. Yes, it is absolutely viable to completely dedicate yourself towards becoming a pure crafter or harvester in this game and providing a massive value towards the group or guild you play with. As everything is player-made and all gear eventually breaks, there will always be a demand for crafters and harvesters. If you are aiming to become a combatant and want to dedicate all your training towards making you as efficient as possible on the battlefield, then picking up combat and exploration as your 2 main tracks will be the way to go. The combat track can't be any more obvious, so we won't be getting into it too much. You will be spending training points here depending on what role you play, DPS, tank, or healer. I trust you guys to have a common sense of MMO knowledge to know what is going to benefit you here. Picking up exploration as your second track will provide you with some very handy skills such as increased mount speed, improved dodging, extra damage versus slow targets, and so forth. On top of that, it allows you to pick up a harvesting skill on the side in order to gather materials so you can start trading with crafters and get that sexy gear. As a crafter, you're gonna want to go for crafting and exploration. Having the movement and harvesting benefits as a crafter are very valuable as well. You'll be able to go out and have that extra mount speed to get away from people chasing you on the map, and having a harvesting skill that complements your craft has its own value for obvious reasons. I think the big question people have here is, will I be completely useless as a crafter on the battlefield? And the answer I would give you to this is no, not at all. As long as you realize what your strengths and weaknesses are and are open to play a class that isn't all too reliant on the combat training tree, you can perform just fine. In the end, the stats you gain from the combat tree only represent about 1/5 of your character's total strength, where gear is the biggest contributor to this. Being a crafter, able to make your own gear more easily and fine-tuning the stats on that gear however you see fit can greatly benefit you in my opinion. Playing support classes are probably the best suited for crafters as they are the least reliant on the combat training tree compared to DPS and tanks. Again, not going too much into detail here, but go ahead and do some research about this and you will reap the benefits. And lastly, harvesters are going to want to go with the combat tree as their secondary track, combined with tanky classes or very mobile classes. As a harvester, you want to be able to survive as long as possible and get away from those nasty players trying to hunt you for all them sweet materials in your inventory. The harvesting playstyle is probably the most risk-first reward type of playstyle, and it's kind of like a different ball game. It's cat chases mouse, and it's kind of like a fun dynamic. I do enjoy doing it, but yeah, just know that if you're gonna be a harvester, you're gonna be the big target on the map because you got all the materials and they want it. I hope this gave you a little bit of an insight as to how you are going to combine these training tracks when you start playing. As the last part of this video, I want to give you guys a few tips and tricks that will help you progress through the training tracks as efficient as possible and show you some early and must-have training skills that are going to make your life a lot easier at the start of the game. Tip number 1. You don't have to complete every training node in order to progress to the next one. As you can see here, each training node has 5 pips or stages to them. However, you only need to spend 4 pips in a node in order to unlock the next one in line. Make sure you read the tooltips though, as some nodes only give you value when you have invested into the 5th pip. Tip number 2. You don't need to complete a track 100% before you can move on to the next sub-track. In order to open up a sub-track, you will either have to complete 75% of the previous track or unlock 5 pips into a specific node in the previous track. So make sure you go and look at the tooltip of the track you are aiming for and see what the requirements are to open it up so that you don't spend points into something that won't help you progress to where you want to go. Tip number 3, and also the last tip, is one that often gets overlooked. Some tracks have a separate node that is not connected to any of the other nodes inside the track, and it has its own requirement to unlock. For example, this basic combat mastery node requires you to complete 90% of the whole track, and in return it unlocks the ability to equip a specific minor discipline that would otherwise be locked for you. So keep an eye open for these, because these usually are pretty valuable to have depending on what type of playstyle you're going for, but just know that they're there and keep an eye open for them. Now let's look at some early on must-have skills depending on what playstyle you decided to go with. First off, and you probably already guessed this by now, unlocking the early nodes that provide you with extra mount speed and such in the exploration track are going to be insanely strong no matter what you set out to do, so it is advised to always go and unlock those first. As a combatant, you are going to want to start investing points into whatever your combat role relies on the most. DPS first goes for offensive nodes and then mitigation nodes. As a tank, you'll prioritize mitigation nodes, and then depending on what type of class you are, you'll go for offensive or support nodes for self-healing. Nodes that increase stamina are very valuable for tanks that play around with barriers, as 1 stamina directly translates into 2 barrier points. Healers go for support, power first, and then mitigation. As a crafter, you are going to want to unlock the specialization subtrack for the profession you want to focus on as soon as possible. The faster you unlock these, the more wanted you will be by other players. To do this as efficiently as possible, you want to apply the tips I provided earlier, like only spending the minimum 4 pips so that you can advance as soon as possible. As a crafter, I also advise you not to unlock more than 2 specializations at one time, as having to train more than that won't keep you competitive with other crafters. Some specializations complement each other very well, so keep that in mind. When it comes to harvesting, you want to aim at unlocking nodes that will allow you to use more advanced harvesting tools for the specific materials you want to gather, and then, just like crafting, work towards unlocking the specialization you want as soon as possible. Again, don't go for more than 2 of these in order to stay competitive. And that's it for this video. I hope you guys got some value out of this, and if you did, please consider subscribing to the channel as it does help me out a lot. Again, I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, so feel free to come in and ask further questions. What playstyle will you be going for after watching this video? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you've been enjoying the Crowfall beta so far, and until next time, ladies and gentlemen, have a good one.